My name is Allison Kim, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Litera Microsystems. For today's webinar, we have Sherry Capel and Chuck Henrik, both from our Evangelist Document Lifecycle team. Today, they're going to talk about the different ways that working on the go can affect data security, and they'll help break down how you keep your data safe while working on the go. So, Chuck, if you don't mind, oh wait, before I kick it off to you, let me just run through a few housekeeping items for those who have never joined us before. The webinar will last for about 30 minutes, and at the end, there will be a Q&A session. At any point throughout the webinar, if you have any questions for our presenters, just submit them into the panel on the right side, and then we'll make sure we'll get to it at the end. With that said, Chuck, take it away.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone. Chuck here. Today, we're going to be talking about trends in remote working and the use of personal devices. Remote working is something that's really taking off in many jurisdictions, many firms. It has an impact on data security, so we'll talk also about how to work securely. And then we'll take questions. So, handing it over to you, Sherry.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you everyone for joining us today. You know, Chuck, as we prepared for this session, I think my biggest challenge was fathoming that remote or flexible working was a trend, because for me, it's been a normal way of working since the very start of my career. Remote working had its beginnings in the mid-'80s when the internet and the ability to connect systems were in their very early and formative days. All I needed was a company-issued modem, a dumb terminal, and a dedicated phone line. And in a single day, I could work from anywhere, well, most notably, at my home. I could work with developers in India, customers in Australia or China, then finish up my day by collaborating with prospects deep in a mountainside somewhere in the US. For all of us who are working in a tech company or tech role in those days, connected systems gave us a rich, connected experience, a sort of boundarylessness that neither a posh office or a 9-to-5 workday would ever be able to facilitate. But it wasn't until the early 2000s when this connectedness extended outside of our back office tech roles, and we began to see mobility emerge for other roles. The first BlackBerry, for example, released in 2002, supported professionals on the go, giving them communication avenues to support staff in the office and to their clients. It's important to note, though, that this was not a remote working experience as we think of it or see or realize today. This was merely a mobile communication device that was segmented from the firm's enterprise systems. You were then expected back in the office when your client meetings or courtroom events were done. And it wasn't until the late 2000s that we saw the emergence of truly flexible or remote working arrangements, one example being the so-called mommy track versus the partner track, which enabled young professional women to work from home or to work flexible hours so they could care for their young families. Unfortunately, none of those things were very transparent or, in fact, really official. Remote working flexibilities were mostly discretionary, almost like an exclusion. That is, I should say, in the US. While the US may have fostered the technology innovations that enabled remote working, it certainly did not pioneer the rights for work-life balance. That credit goes entirely to the EU, where work-life balance laws have been enforced for 20 years. In fact, an enhancement to these laws aims to focus on parents of younger children and cover things like maternity, paternity leave, etc. And that flexible working part covers the fact that all working parents with children up to at least 8 years old and in all careers, there's that inclusivity that's starting to emerge here, will have the right to request the followable flexible working arrangements: reduced working hours, flexible working hours, and most importantly, the flexibility on the place of work. It is my, and Chuck's great timing here to be able to tell you all that hours ago, that new directive was signed into law in the EU just this morning. So with that, I think that it's, again, really important to see how our remote working and flexible working has evolved. And in fact, so best sort of set of statistics that I found, by the way, very general, was the Upwork study that this organization has done for probably the last 3 years. And in this recent study in 2018, they were rather surprised to finally learn that now our organizations, there are 63% of all companies that have remote workers, yet 57% of them have no remote work policies. And while this may have been taken from a future workforce hiring kind of report, the implications for us in technology and data security are very clear. What this also means is that they learned that 48% of organizations use freelancers. And I should mention, they also interviewed hiring managers for law firms. And so this ability to work as a sort of digital nomad has increased by 55% more than just the prior year. Another statistic very interesting is that 6 times more of the hiring managers believe that agile teams, virtually distributed, were more the norm, and that 3 times more of them believe that the actual physical office is really a temporary location, as opposed to one that is a destination for each day. The final things that again struck me again in my realization, again going back to when I started in this, is that I had such a privilege to be able to do this. What we now know is that 60% more organizations just from last year's survey are recognizing that their flexible working and remote working policies are more lenient and, most importantly, more inclusive. And 2 times more of the respondents believe that the skills are more important than the physical location. And this transfers to the momentum that's established around legal. About 2 years ago, we saw in March of 2007, we saw 2 big firms declare remote working and flexible working as official policies: Baker McKenzie, Jackson Lewis, Morgan Lewis. And then we started to recognize the trend of it in an article in August 2007, leading right up to the announcement of Weil Gotshal in November of 2018, where they announced that their associates would be officially able to work remotely 1 day a week. And so this again became an official policy. In the UK, where their law firms have operating parameters a bit different than here in the US, we're now seeing over 1,000 lawyers working in what is called a platform firm. A platform firm is a technology facilitated law firm. In other words, there is no physical location. These are 1,000 lawyers working in any number of locales who are delivering legal services to clients and to those who request the services. Then I think it's really interesting, just in February, so a month and a half ago or so, The Strategist wrote a kind of thought-provoking article about, really, is this remote working thing a trend, or has it become the norm? And I think much like how I began my discussion of our journey today, this trend is really, it's our new norm. And while it may have been my norm since the beginning of my career, I'm now recognizing that it includes so many more people and careers than it once did. Chuck?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this trend has been my norm for the last 7 years and your normal for decades, because I've been working remotely for the last 7 years, either from home or on the road. And it's great in that for work-life balance, I don't miss commute time. That's a huge value to me, having those extra hours per day. It does mean that I have to be a bit more disciplined. Fortunately for me, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm a little bit of a workaholic. So it's easy for me to tumble out of bed, grab a coffee, and then start working, and then 12 hours later realize I haven't left the house. Other people have the opposite challenge. It's easier to watch TV. So you do have to be more disciplined, and you also have to be disciplined about your work habits and security practices, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this new EU directive is really important. And I'm just curious, Sherry, what's your perspective on this new normal?
So I think the thing, Chuck, is that I have always believed that beginnings are crucial, correct? And for me, my beginning of this sort of approach was honestly not necessarily well teed up. And that is why I'm so adoring how organizations are now taking these more official approaches from an HR perspective. And I'll tell my story, which is that my organization, a many generation ago version of Microsystems, was owned by two brothers. And let's just say of the day, right? It was the 80s, and I was a young, very ambitious woman professional in technology. Now I'm a little bit older of an ambitious woman in technology, but at the time I had my first daughter. It was in 1987, and one of the things that was fascinating about that is when I showed up back at work after my maternity leave, they were surprised to see me, because you see, they believed that all I was going to do was stay home and care for my daughter and work remotely with that big old dumb terminal and dedicated phone line that I had. And I said, no, I have, lots of value to contribute. So no, I'm here. I have a great care situation. But beyond, to them, it was just an expected thing that I would not work in the office because I was caring for a young daughter. And so I think today is such a great day that we now give people, we legislate for people. 500 million people in the EU will enjoy this privilege. And I think it's just something that we should all appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit also on a point that's really important about balancing remote versus on-site work, because it's important to be physically present with the people that you work with, because there's a lot of communication that happens in person. So it's great to have that flexibility of being able to decide or have some arrangements where you can be in the office when you need to be and be at home when you need to be, or be on the road. So let's talk about how exactly do you work out of the office, but do it securely. There's always a trade-off or compromise between security and convenience. You have to find the right balance between them so you can get your work done efficiently, but at the same time with an appropriate level of security. If firms want remote workers to work securely, they need to provide the infrastructure, the software, the guidance that makes it easy for people to do what they're supposed to and eliminate excuses for not doing the right thing. On the other hand, remote workers have a responsibility to use common sense as well as appropriate tools to handle data appropriately, even if it's inconvenient. Sure, it's more convenient to leave the door to your home unlocked. You don't have to worry about finding your keys. But is that sensible? No. So, secure remote working relies on both infrastructure and behavior. Systems and tools that people don't use are useless. But people can't work securely if they don't have the systems, tools, and knowledge that allows them to do the right thing for their clients, the firm, and themselves. That's why infrastructure plus behavior equals remote working security. Both the firm and remote workers share responsibility for working securely. The firm needs to provide the right tools and framework, ensure that the software they're using is secure and that the vendors are responsible, provide training so people know what they need to do, and then make sure that they do it. Workers need to understand their responsibilities to their clients, take advantage of the tools and the training that the firm provides, learn new habits, and stay mindful. So let's start with firm responsibility to provide infrastructure. It's in the interest of the firm and its clients to provide a secure infrastructure. The best way to make it easy for people to connect to your office environment remotely is via Citrix or remote desktop or any other dial-in and work platform. That might not be affordable for some firms, and even if it is, people will save files to their remote devices for working online. So make sure that their devices are encrypted. Document control, a document management system, is essential, whether people are working inside or outside the office. There's a DMS to suit any budget, and it's essential to provide access control and an audit trail of who does what when. It's important to make sure people have a secure cloud location to save documents. Ideally, it's encrypted. Dropbox isn't good enough. But also consider a secure file sharing option where people don't necessarily need a Dropbox equivalent that's secure. Instead, something like our secure file transfer solution allows people to share files of any size, either via Outlook or via the browser, using download links instead of actual attachments. And it has built-in forwarding prevention, attachment expiry, audit logging. Server-based metadata cleaning enables automatic metadata cleaning for all users, desktop and mobile, with auditability. Metadact's mobile alerts, for example, gives mobile workers the same control over high-risk metadata as they get when they're using Outlook. BYOD, bring your own device, sounds attractive since it saves the firm money. You don't have to buy mobile phones or tablets for users who have their own. But are those personal devices encrypted? Providing a device to a remote user is expensive, but it helps ensure a higher probability of security. But whether you provide devices or allow people to use their own, it's important to make sure that the mobile devices are secure and that you require your users, your remote workers, to prove that their personal devices are encrypted and secure against malware. And that means asking them to bring them in so that you can check to make sure that they're encrypted. A virtual private network, or VPN, is essential for anyone who connects to an unsecured open Wi-Fi network, hotel, coffee shop, airport, airplane. A VPN ensures that any traffic to and from a worker's device is encrypted. Otherwise, third parties can listen in, grab details like logins and credit card info, etc. People can use a VPN from mobile phones and tablets as well as laptops. I do it all the time. I have a VPN subscription on my mobile phone, on my laptop, as well as my tablet. Mobile phone data is always more secure than an open Wi-Fi network, and it can be a good alternative to a VPN. Mobile phone data can also be faster than hotel, cafe, or airport networks. Many people have unlimited data in their home country, and EU subscribers can enjoy their data plans anywhere in the EU. But if someone's traveling outside their data plan, then it makes good business sense for the firm to reimburse them for SIM only or some other data plan so that they can use their mobile device as a hotspot. It's important to make sure that you're working with vendors who are security minded, and that's true for your office applications as well as your remote applications. So you need to double check with your vendors to make sure that they take data security as seriously as you do. So ask them some questions. What information do they hold, and where do they hold it, and how do they keep it secure? That's extremely important for any software as a service or any cloud storage location. It's also important for any mobile apps that you use or that your users use on the devices that they're using for work. For software vendors, you need to also ask, what secure coding practices do they employ? What coding procedures do they have in place to test to make sure that their code doesn't have built-in security bugs? How often do they conduct code reviews to look for security vulnerabilities? And how often do they conduct penetration testing? Ask for a copy of the most recent security review done by a reputable security consultancy. If they can't or won't supply one, then that's something to consider. Finally, training. You need to train your users about security, especially your remote users. Explain why it's in their personal interest, their own personal reputation and personal liability, as well as just keeping their job, to do the right thing security-wise. Keep the message and the training simple, so it's easy to remember and comply with. Use online training to keep track of who completes the training. It should be mandatory. There's a wide variety of training systems available to suit different budgets. Require everyone to take the course and refreshers, and make sure people who don't do so well get the extra training they need. Here at Litera Microsystems, we're required to take security training courses online, and our progress is monitored. And it's great to get those refreshers because you're reminded of things that you may have forgotten or learn new things that you hadn't considered. Compliance is critical, and you have to use both carrots and sticks. You should set up your systems to enforce secure password practices, and that's true for remote workers or office workers. Complex passwords regularly changed. You should work with your ISP to regularly spot check how people are connecting when they're dialing in from a remote location. If they're not connecting via a VPN, either their own or a commercial one, ask people why not. Most security breaches go unreported, either because people don't realize they've occurred or they're too embarrassed to report them. Don't punish people for reporting a problem. Thank them for reporting, fix the issue, and then work with them, excuse me, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But if a breach occurs because someone didn't bother to follow procedure because it was inconvenient, then that might be a time to consider a penalty. And that goes back to what I said earlier about security versus convenience. There's always a trade-off. When it comes to us as users, as workers, well, security starts with each of us individually. And then again, that's true whether you're in the office or working remotely. We need to understand our legal and professional responsibilities to our clients, our firms, and ourselves. And those training courses I mentioned just help with that. Some clients have special security concerns, so you need to make sure you get their approval to work on client confidential material outside the office and comply with any particular requirements that they might have. We need to use the right tools, both hardware and software. If your firm provides the tools, use them and follow instructions. If they don't, find the right tools and use them anyway. If you don't know how to handle a situation securely, ask questions and get training. LTC4.org, I always give them a shout out. It's a great nonprofit organization that specializes in making sure that lawyers in particular understand what their basic technology skills are and helps them understand the training they need to get in order to get to the right place. Make sure that you keep your devices up to date. Your operating system, your productivity applications, and antivirus. Don't postpone updates because updates are quite often about security. Encrypt every device, even your phone. Sure, it might cause an extra logon step, but it's worth the peace of mind to know that your data is safe, even if your device is lost or stolen. There's a learning curve to learning how to work remotely securely, but you quickly develop good habits. Always connect securely. Never use public Wi-Fi without a VPN or your mobile data as a hotspot. If you don't have if your firm hasn't provided a VPN, sign up for a commercial VPN. If you don't have a VPN handy, use your mobile phone as a hotspot. Use a secure browser that warns you about insecure and malware sites. Firefox does a good job on that. Beware of add-ins and mobile phone apps that require lots of permissions and scarf up lots of your data. Never use public computers, internet cafes, or hotel lobby computers because they're not secure and anyone can walk around behind you and see what you're doing. Loose lips sink ships, so don't talk about your business in public, shared working spaces, elevators, public transportation. And be aware of anyone who could read your screen, like the passenger sitting next to you or in the row behind you on the plane. When you leave your device unattended, either shut it down or lock the screen. As a general note, when you're working remotely, you need to double check whenever you change circumstances to make sure that you're doing the right thing. For example, if you're working from home, then presumably you're working on a secure home Wi-Fi network, but you should double check to make sure. It's unlikely a stranger would be looking over your shoulder while you're working at home. But once you leave the house, you need to double check that you're following good practice. Like if you connect to an airport Wi-Fi system, make sure you do that before you open Outlook on your laptop, so you have time to connect to your VPN before you start sharing confidential information across the air. Taking that extra minute or two can make a real difference in your remote security. So we've talked about the trends, we've talked about security aspects, and now we've got some resources that we'd like to share with you.
Thanks, Chuck. So as you mentioned, this is a whole sort of, the momentum as we saw is building. So there's so much to learn about it. And so one of the resources I put together is just an abbreviated list of some of the remote working vocabulary, both from a human perspective and, of course, from a technology perspective. There is, in fact, Chuck, a whole online dictionary of remote working definitions. And one of the ones I want to pull out and feature in this before we close is work shifting, that term that the Citrix, former president of Citrix termed for the technology, being able to enable working from anywhere at any time. But one of the things I think we've all realized is it's a much bigger encompassing term than that it's literally how we do our work. It's what we do. It's not where we do it. And so that shifting in work and that shifting in responsibilities, the EU directive today, all of these things and that momentum within legal to recognize this are all things that we should know about. So to that point, the next page in your handout will be a set of links referencing to the WILE announcement, the dictionary online for remote working terms, and some other things that I think you'll find useful to support the kinds of work shifts that are happening in your workplace.
Great. Thank you, Sherry and Chuck. So let's jump into the questions. We have a few. First one comes from Lisa. She wants to know, can you tell us more about secure file transfer and why is it better than Dropbox?
Right. Well, secure file transfer is a great product that allows firms to retain control of attachments to emails and allows users to send attachments of any size to anyone with auditability, attachment lifetime, kill switch built in. It's integrated into Outlook, but it's also available in the browser. And the way it works is that when an email is sent with attachments of any size, we have people who are sending gigabytes by email at a time. The secure file transfer server takes over, stores the attachment files, replaces them with download links, and then inserts those download links into the email so that only the link is sent. And you can attach passwords to the download link or not, depending on how secure you want to be about those particular attachments. But it's important because not only do you retain physical custody of those files, they're on your server, not being hosted someplace on the cloud, you also retain access control. You can prevent someone from forwarding the attachments, for example, to someone that they're not supposed to. And like I said, I think earlier, you have an audit trail of who does what when with those attachments. You don't have any of that kind of security with Dropbox or any of those other consumer grade sharing locations. Those are fine for things that, personal files that you're not going to care too much about. But when you're dealing with client confidential information, there's that professional responsibility as well as potential liability that attaches to not doing the right thing, not handling them securely, and not having a record of who did what when. So that's why secure file transfer as a solution is better than something like Dropbox.
Awesome. And then on to the next one. Brian wants to know, can you tell us more about Litera Microsystems software security?
Certainly. As Chuck mentioned, so many of the updates that we're receiving, whether Windows or Office, they're very much related to getting security updates in place. And in a very similar vein, microsystems, Litera Microsystems technologies are equally being updated to address those same things. One of the things you'll notice is there's a blog post on our website about the importance of upgrading and keeping your software current. And indeed, we are doing a continuous job of minding precisely those items Chuck listed about your software vendors, making sure that penetration testing is done and assurances have been made around the security of our applications on the desktop and otherwise. So.
Great. Thanks. It looks like we're out of time. Before we close today's session, I just want to mention that on the right-hand panel, you can also download this handout. We will also send out the slides after the webinar, as well as a recording for you guys to have on record. And just a quick shout out for our next webinar. We have a spotlight on next Thursday that will focus on our product release highlights from Q1. So make sure to sign up for that by going to www.litera.com/webinars. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll have a Litera Learning webinar on tech audits and how that can help you identify the right technology to fit your firm's requirements. All right, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Sherry and Chuck, for presenting.
You're very welcome.
All right, everyone have a good
day, everyone.
All right.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.